Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market, where every day we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to hopefully make so much money on the internet. Loaded up for discussion today. We have Bitcoin back to $108,000. However, Circle is down another 10%, dipped beneath $200. We'll have a general macro and crypto and stock update from Legendary in a little bit. To talk about that, we've got investment platform Republic planning to use Solana to sell investors exposure to SpaceX. So that is pretty interesting. So I'll be breaking that down in a little bit too. And then finally, prediction market Kalshi raises $185 million at a $2 billion valuation. That comes on the back of Poly Markets raised just yesterday as well. So we'll be talking prediction markets towards the end of the show. We're delighted to have Felix Protocol on with us today, one of the premier money markets on Hyperliquid. We're always going to continue to try to host the most interesting conversations going on in crypto. Felix is definitely one of those candidates. So looking forward to have that conversation towards the end of the show today. But before we get there, I've got Legendary in the co-host seat. We are ready to get into it. But just a reminder before we do, nothing that we say here is financial advice because everything is very, very risky. We don't know anything for sure. So please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Ledge, just it's Thursday. It's the 26th of June. How you doing?
GM. I'm back from the driving range, and I am aware that basically the last 3 days, so this entire week, when you asked me how I'm doing in the morning, my answer was something golf related. But yet again, I hit up the driving range, had a session with my coach. Was the only person in this impossible heat actually playing golf. We have a 34 degrees. How much is that in Fahrenheit? Like somewhere in the 90s, I assume. 94 in Fahrenheit. So pretty hot, but way better than the last session.
Okay. What are our coping strategies for the heat? I remember English said yesterday, he's kind of on top of the market. He's not really here for the show. He's here for the lifestyle content. So before we get into the main stuff, which hopefully some people are here for, what is Legendary's top few strategies for dealing with a hot summer?
Just stay at home. I mean, the thing is,
but that's your solution all the time.
That's true, but like most houses don't have AC in Austria, in Vienna specifically, because it's not allowed to, because it ruins the look of the city if you have like this outer unit of your like split device on the facade. So this is why they are banned. But if you have the luxury of living on a like penthouse apartment, basically you can just put it on your rooftop terrace and that's okay. Don't have AC though. I have water-cooled ceilings and floors, which is pretty nice because it creates a very like natural feeling coolness without the breeze of the AC, and that's super lovely.
So wait, what's the solution? Water-cooled ceilings and floors.
Yeah.
I have never heard of that in my life. Is this just me being uncultured?
It's relatively modern and it's extremely energy efficient. You won't have that in a like historical building because you would have to rip
I
up.
thought you were going to say you won't have that in the UK. You guys are just useless. You guys, it's very modern. You're very ancient. You're an old empire. You're just completely useless. That's how I read what you just said, which is probably true. So I wouldn't be surprised. But I mean, we also
guys have ACs like legally, or is it also against the building code in London?
No. You can have AC, but
yeah, way more forward than Vienna then.
Well, we don't have any water cooled flooring or ceilings though. Okay, well let's. I like those top tips. Let's get into what hopefully some other people are here for too, which is the main stuff, the main meat of the show. Let's get into the price action, starting with the majors as usual. To get everyone up to speed with what's going on, then we've got the bigger discussion on the headlines as usual. We've got Bitcoin looking pretty tasty here, up at $108,000, 1% up.
Refresh.
Oh, do I need to refresh?
107.4.
Okay. Not as tasty as I thought. 107.4, not bad though. Up a couple of percent on the week, pretty much flat today. ETH is up a percent to 2.4K. ETH is always worth 2.4K. XRP is flat at $2.20. BNB is flat at $645. Solana is down a percent to 143. in our favorite alternative major cryptocurrencies, Hyperliquid is down 3% to 37, and SUI is down 3% to $2.60. So that is that on the more major side. On the meme coin side, let's see what is going on. I might also just hit a refresh there to make sure we are completely up to speed. But okay, my page has loaded. Doge is down a couple of percent to 16 cents. Pepe is down 6%. Trump is down 2. SPX is down 7. Fartcoin is down 9. WIF is down 8. Pengu is down 4, despite some quite big Pengu news, which we'll touch on in a second. Dog on Bitcoin is up another 6. That's been going up quite a lot. It's up 20% on the week now. So that's pretty impressive given the rest of the market. Popcat is down 10. Mostly red here, guys, to be completely honest. Aside from that, yeah, it's just a bit of a red day, I would say. Getting into the headlines themselves, we've got Bitcoin back to 107K. Let's say Circle is down 10%, beneath $200. Investment platform Republic is going to plan to use Solana to sell investors exposure to SpaceX. Talking about internet capital markets, I think that might be an example of it coming soon. So we'll break that down. That's pretty interesting to us, and it's especially interesting given the line of thinking, Legendary, that we've been sharing recently, which is maybe some of these pump tokenomics and pumping assets will not be meme coins now. It'll be some of these stocks that retail can get a slice of, whether that's IPOs, whether that's Bitcoin treasury companies, whether that's SpaceX coming on Solana, you know. So let's discuss that a bit later. And finally, prediction market. Kalshi raises $185 million at a $2 billion valuation. Legendary will break down some of those details as well. Big day, big 2 days for prediction markets, especially with the Polymarket news yesterday as well, their big raise. Some notable price action. Movement Labs is actually up 20% to back to almost $2 billion FDV. Obviously had huge issues, dropped, came out as high as 10 bill. So hugely down. Rishi's left as CEO, or the person leading. And I don't know why that's back up 20%. It's obviously dipped down a lot. So don't know what's going on there. Mocha's up 10% to 680 mil FTV on news that they're becoming, or they're going to be building an L1 focusing on the kind of identity layer of Web3. And Humanity Protocol, which launched yesterday, is down 30% after TGE. It's at around a $300 million FDV. Is there anything we need to know on the NFT side, Ledge, before we get into the main stuff?
Yeah, let's take a quick look at the NFT side of things. But basically, most of the majors are flat. Pudgy Penguins are flat, but they do have a green week indeed. They're up 6%. Bored Apes are dipping down another percent, down 4% in the week to an 11.15 ETH floor now. Slowly getting into the range where I'm going to start to hunt more and more actively for my old ape and buying that back. Yep. Hasn't been listed in a while. I'm not going to say which one it was. I mean, some people will probably still remember, but I don't want for someone to snipe that away. But apart from that, not a lot going on. Milady is up 0.5%, Azuki is down 2%. So a bit of red, a bit of green, but the general trend is, with the exception of Pudgy, that the majors are trending down on the NFT side of thing. But we had a beautiful exception with this pretty clean Azuki Spirit that sold for 70 ETH. And then, as we said so many times in the show, the art sales are still doing well, are still going through. What are you making of this? You've been more into art than I have. Have you been collecting more? You still have your X copies? Did you sell them? Like, how are you thinking about the art side of things at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I just think the art side of things has always been strong. I mean, I know it obviously corrected based on how things happened in 2021, but I think if you can get in on the way I would do the art market at the moment is you've got to get in at primary. Don't like the price, like a lot of the price in the same way that a lot of think about it just from a VC perspective for a second, although I know a lot of artists will not like to think of it like that, but it's a helpful analogy in assessing the value. In the same way that you would have argued that a lot of the value was captured in the private market, i.e., before things start trading publicly, whether on the token side, I think a lot of the value is captured on the private side and art also. Like you need to be in the private round. You need to be in like when Sam Spratt dropped the masks, they were sold for 2.5 or 6 ETH. They all went to holders or people who the holders recommended. And that's how I got in. One of our friends and listeners to the show, and someone who works at one of the big arts kind of funds, asked me if I'd like to participate. And so that's how you do it, right? Like you're in on the private level, and then you never see that price again. Like you just never see that price again. You go into price discovery. The masks went on to trade as high as 18, 19,000 when ETH was strong. I suspect they're maybe 10 to 12 to 15,000 now. Without checking, it would be in that region. I suspect they're trading between 5 and 6 ETH when they were sold for 2.5. So depending on the strength of ETH, it can kind of. So this is my point. When Jack Butcher sold his latest pieces out of Paris, it was done in a very kind of private way, and then then you go into price discovery after, and it's always more. It's immediately more after. So I don't particularly like the secondary market if you were purely looking at it from an investor perspective, but if you like the art and you think something's going to go up over the long term, then I think that's fine. I also, as I've said before, I like the physical side of things. I think that's a big differentiating factor. And so anything digital and physical paired, I really like. So that would be my thoughts there, Ledge. I don't know. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, that's helpful. So not chase the secondary market. If anything, try to get access to some primary good mints and then hold them for a longer time.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, in a way, you can kind of, once you've been doing this stuff for long enough, you can see the similarities across different markets, right? It's the same as getting the whitelist and minting before everyone else. It's no different. Like you really want to be in before other people. But on the art side, you need to then show that you're not you need to not sell, because you're not going to get invited to the next one. So it's which is also kind of similar to the whitelist kind of thing. You need to build up your reputation that you're probably a strong holder in some way. One other thing to point out just on the NFT side before we hit the other stuff is, I don't know if you can bring up my latest tweet or your latest tweet, because I think we both did one on it. There's an interesting mint on Mega ETH on Saturday, which you should probably be aware of. It is the Megalio mint. Milady holders have the first go at getting some guaranteed mints, because the argument is this is going to be like it's going to be like the Milady. This is Milady's on ETH, Hippios on Hyperliquid. Where else have they gone? There's other Dreamelios on Abstract. So it's like the equivalent collection on Mega ETH. Obviously, Mega ETH have the bad buns already, which we are significant holders, and they've actually got a huge allocation as well. So if you've already participated, on the Mega ETH NFT side with bad buns, I think they've got as many as 1,000 spots potentially. Ledge, can you maybe just detail the launch details in case people are interested? And if people don't have anything, is there a way for them to get exposure?
There is 4 phases. There are 4 phases. GTD for Milady holders, 150 spots, 1 mint per whitelist. Then also guaranteed mint for Megalio testnet holders, plus 100 major collabs. That's a total of 1.8K out of the 4.4K spots with 3 mints per whitelist. Then there's the first come, first served phase for bad buns holders. This is the one that has me both interested and worried, because you need to split up your bad buns across different wallets and you get 2 mints per whitelist, which means I could max mint 64, but it's absolutely impossible to do that by hand. And then there's phase 4, first come, first served for Megalio friends, and they get 5 mints per whitelist. And then theoretically, if something is left, it would go to public.
What do you and the mint price is what, Ledge?
That's a good question. 0.025.
What are you forecasting here? Have you given much thought to it?
I just want to mint as much as I can.
Cool.
Not good at forecasting.
So 0.025, I think, is just a very attractive price, right?
Yeah.
I think it's like
I don't care what it does, to be honest. But I think it's gonna do decently well.
Well, if you're minting 60, you make a little bit more, but
yeah,
maybe even still.
It's still like more than 1 ETH, right?
Yeah, you'll still not be able to get all of those anyway, I don't think. Yeah, I love the risk reward on this one. Obviously, maybe we're slightly biased because I don't even know if we are biased, because on some level, this is it's kind of potentially competition for bad buns on Mega ETH. But I just love the risk reward, even if you didn't have any um, bad buns and would not. I don't know if you will be able to get onto the mint here, because I think it's probably going to get sold out before it gets to that final first come first serve section. Probably, it would be my guess. But at 0.025 for a Mega ETH NFT, which seems to have some motion around it right now, I would probably think it's a nice entry point. Let's put it like that.
Is it me, or is Mega ETH feeling a bit different with the plethora of NFT mints and collections before mainnet has launched? Or am I just biased because I have more exposure to that and I follow that more closely?
I think it's probably that. Like, from what I could tell, I remember Berachain having loads of cultural energy around their ecosystem. I don't know if they had. I'm pretty sure they had a bunch of NFTs as well. It wasn't just
Yeah,
the
but they were
steady.
all the token gambler, right? The like 4 or 5 collections that they had were that bet on the token, where CBB got, I don't know how many millions he put into those.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know 100%, but I feel like there was some culture there. I do think we are maybe the two things are true at the same time. Maybe we're like slightly more involved here because we're kind of taking a directional bet, and maybe independent of us, right? Other people's, there seems to be a bit more energy around it. I don't know 100%. But yeah, let's see. So just thought that'd be helpful to bring people's attention. That's on Saturday. We will keep an eye out. Getting into the rest of the news to keep you up to speed with everything. We've got, I think this is huge, actually. The US federal housing orders businesses to account cryptocurrency as an asset for mortgage. Huge news, that you can use that as collateral. Then in other news, GameStop has raised another $450 million through an additional offering of zero interest convertible senior notes to buy more Bitcoin. Igloo announces the Canary ETF, which includes Pengu and Pudgy Penguin NFTs. That has been filed now. It's pretty huge news. Also, World Liberty Fire working to make the token WLFI transferable. Remember when they did that raise, they said this is a non-transferable token. Unsurprisingly, they want to make that transferable, which I think should mean tradable as well. Bitcoin ETFs, I just checked this morning, in the last 2 days have more than $1 billion worth of inflows, which is quite significant, more than what we've seen in the past. So big numbers flowing into the Bitcoin ETFs. ETH ETFs looking pretty healthy as well, to be honest. A lot of green there too, but Bitcoin may be more notable for today. VFriends announces a collaboration with NBA superstar Steph Curry as part of the manga series of stickers. This is obviously the IP of Gary V. And finally, Mockaverse, as I mentioned as well, announced the Mocha chain, a layer 1 powered by Mocha token to build the world's largest identity network. So that is interesting to note. That is the roundup to get everyone up to speed with everything. We'll be diving into the headlines in a little bit. But before we get there, what's catching your attention from around the space first?
Definitely the housing news to use crypto as an asset for your mortgage. I think that this is massive. I mean, obviously we have to see how it works out in practice. Timeline has been joking that, you know, you borrow against, or you mortgage against your fart coin and chill house and whatever other meme coin holdings to buy the house. But if it's just the majors, so if it's just your BTC, which is probably the most likely thing, that alone is like very, very solid. So I'm curious to see how this will play out in practice. And I'm really curious to see how they will look at the like value of that, if it's more volatile, and how they will update that. But it is a massive news, because it is crossing that chasm between cryptocurrencies and real life assets.
Yeah, I agree. One thing I just want to check, I've been speaking a lot about borrowing. This is my general thesis. Maybe some people have heard it already, but I think it's important to repeat it, because I think this is like one of my biggest learnings from being in crypto for as long as I've been now, which is not forever, but at least 4 years or so. And Ledge, while I do this, would it be possible for you to just have a look at the Aave rate for borrowing against Bitcoin? like wrapped Bitcoin or any kind of other type of Bitcoin, because I think that will either support my point, hopefully. But like the thing that I've realized is that the quality of an asset, because remember, I do a lot of lending against NFTs as well. And what I've realized is that the quality of an asset is just revealed to you in the lending market. Like everyone can debate as much as they want on Twitter that this is worth this and this should be worth this or whatever. And things can go to really high prices too. Like pudgy penguins can go to over 100 grand, bored apes can go to over 100 grand, and all these things can happen. But when it comes down to it, and you're truly trying to assess value, if no one will loan you 50 to 60% loan to value, that which means if your asset is allegedly worth 100 grand and no one will loan you 50 grand, just say, at around 10% or something like that, which seems to be the market rate at the moment, your asset isn't worth the thing that you think that it is. Because the reason why that works is because lenders don't want to get underwater, and therefore they're not going to lend you something which they think there is a chance for you for the price to dip beneath the price that they have lent you. So really all the true value is revealed, or the confidence levels in each asset is revealed in the lending market. So when you can see CryptoPunks being lent at, I don't know, 60, 70, 50, 60 grand for a $100,000 asset, admittedly, the interest rate's got kind of high at the moment, but I think that kind of represents the risk in the market as well, where, you know, as markets go risk on, you're going to have to pay a little bit more. But you're not going to get that type of loan for a bunch of other types of assets. In the same way, now that I'm starting to borrow more against Bitcoin and stuff on Hyperliquid, it's become obvious to me that Bitcoin is just such a pristine asset. Like it's just like if you can borrow against Bitcoin for 4% at 4% or 4 or 5% on Hyperliquid now, that's like I haven't even fully considered how great that is. Like this is going to be really, really important moving forward, and I can't wait to speak to Ross from Felix in a little bit. Obviously, their premier money market on Hyperliquid, and we're going to be talking about Felix and Hyperliquid and all of this lending and borrowing, which is what their speciality is. We'll be having him on the show in about 15 minutes or so. But it's incredibly powerful to be holding an asset which you can borrow against at that rate, because it kind of means you don't need to sell stuff. I think that's the direction that I'm thinking. Let's just checking with you on ETH. How does that rate compare to like borrowing against wrapped Bitcoin?
4.7% if you borrow Tether.
Okay, so it's very, very similar basically. So there's no market difference between borrowing against Bitcoin on Hyperliquid or borrowing against Bitcoin on ETH. Either way, that's a really awesome rate to be able to borrow against. So that's one of my lines of thinking here.
Can get it lower on some of the L2s even. Just looking at the borrow aggregator on DeFi Llama, the lowest you could possibly go is like 3.6% as like borrow APY, which is insane. And it's something I never used like historically. But again, now that I feel like, I think what changed for me, let's put it like that. It's something you mentioned. What changed for me is this, sharing the total Bitcoin spot ETF net inflow in dollars over the last couple of days and weeks. As you said, we've seen more than $1 billion cumulatively on the last 2 days, 350 mil the day before. And basically, it's just a beautiful uptrend, which is taking out volatility. And I'm not maxing out my loans. As you said, if I can borrow like 50%, at 50% loan to value against, and I deposit like 2 Bitcoin and I borrow 100 grand against that, that is so helpful. It's something that I didn't consider before, as I said, but now that the volatility is getting less and less and less, it has become a staple for me. For example, what did I do yesterday? I borrowed against the Bitcoin on Use Felix. I took the stables out of Hyperliquid and I deposited them into Infinex to just have more capital there. to participate in those weekly raffles. And for the 4% or 4.5% or whatever I'm paying, it's just worth to do that if you have an opportunity where you can put your stables to work or do whatever you want to do with them. And with that loan health factor, with only 50% or like 45% borrowed against my BTC, I feel pretty confident. You are on mute.
This is the really important point, which may get missed by people. So, really important to keep the health factor healthy. You don't, if you're only borrowing against half, your liquidation price is probably Bitcoin going to like 60K or something, 60, 58K. In that case, you're probably you're gonna be feeling relatively comfortable. But if you're not comfortable even with that, you can go even lower. So it's kind of just like unlocking capital, especially in this current market where, as we described yesterday, you can borrow against that rate and make more just by providing liquidity. Like, obviously, you have smart contract risk when you put that capital somewhere else, which always exists. But I just think it's a beautiful scenario now. And as things kind of mature, I saw in the comments that Stussy said, crypto for mortgages is a few years out. It's too unstable at the current time. Got to hold it on a sex. OG Bitcoiners probably won't partake. Yep. Yeah, I think this is going to be immature for now. But the seeds are getting sown, I think, for people to be able to do this at some point in time in the future, which will be very helpful. But agree, it's going to be a little bit early at the moment. Just with a comment from Overarch as well on YouTube. Exactly, B. The game is to have the most amount of Bitcoin in years to come and not sell it. I mean, if you're going to continue to be able to borrow against it at 3-4% in the future, because people view this as some kind of pristine asset, like, you do not want to sell your Bitcoin, I don't think. Speaking of, Funky has appeared. Unsurprisingly, as we talk about never selling our Bitcoin, Funky, welcome to the stage, my man. How are things? What's your take here?
Yeah, never sell. And there is already a company, and I wish I could remember the name off the top of my head, and I'll look it up, that will already do this, where you can submit Bitcoin, you can deposit it with them. So does become custodial in some sense, because you have to turn over Bitcoin. They hold it for 4 years, and that counts as like the down payment of your house. So as long as you're making your payments and so on and so forth, at like the 4-year mark, once you get past a certain point, then they re-release the Bitcoin back to you. I've seen it on the news. I'm trying to remember the name of the company, but this already exists. So this is just paving the way. So it's a little bit, even as early as all this sounds, like there's already at least one company doing this.
Okay. Super interesting. Appreciate that additional context, Funk. Right, we gotta get it moving today. We've only got 10 minutes before we got Ross from Felix Protocol joining us, because, as I said, we want to talk this lending and borrowing that we've been speaking about so much, and want to get into Felix Protocol, one of the most prominent protocols on Hyperliquid today. So excited to have that conversation in just a little bit. Let's rock it through the headlines though, Ledge. In general, Bitcoin's back to 107K. Circle is down a little bit though. What's the quick update you want to give us on the general market movements?
Yeah, absolutely. The main thing I mentioned, that was to do with the very strong inflow in ETFs. As you said, a Circle, if we move on to the stock side of things, is down another 11%. It's trading at 198 with no significant action on the pre-market, where it's basically very flat. Coinbase, however, and we talked about it on the show yesterday, is up 40% over the last 5 days. I changed my stance on that. I was saying earlier this week that I don't want to rotate my Circle profits, my double up with Circle into Coinbase. After seeing this price action and also seeing the willingness a couple of days ago to run even higher than that, to run all the way to 364-ish, 350, it's at 355 right now. I am happy to do this as a short-term trade and see if I can add like another 10-15% on top of that. The stock market, however, per se, is still looking very good. We said on the show yesterday, we are very close for the S&P 500, within the 1% range of all-time high. And the other thing I wanted to look at is this poly market bet, to get a sense of how the market is thinking for the rest of the year. The question is, what price will Bitcoin hit in 2025? $14.2 million in volume on that. And the consensus is around this range. So 70% are thinking 120K we're going to see this year. 52% are thinking, so more than half, bit more than half, that we're going to see 130K, the price of BTC. And it's still a third of the market thinks that we're going to see 150. So that sentiment is a very, very bullish one.
Interesting. Yeah. A good set of updates there. I don't really have anything more to add on that. I think we just need to go around, get some quick updates on in that respect. Let's keep it moving because we wanted to touch on two more headlines today, which I think are interesting. Getting into this investment platform. This is the news that investment firm Republic is set to let retail investors get exposure to one of tech's most coveted startups, Elon Musk's SpaceX. This was reported on CoinDesk. Starting this week, the platform plans to sell blockchain-based SpaceX tokens, whose value is set to track the value of the privately held SpaceX, reported by the Wall Street Journal. The way it works is each SpaceX token is a promissory note issued under the regulation crowdfunding, a provision in the 2012 Jobs Act that allows small security sales to retail buyers, and holders of the SpaceX token won't be shareholders in the company, which was valued at around $350 billion in December last year, but would participate in the price action of the shares. So this is not like holding the shares themselves, because the shares are privately traded. And, just in case you're interested in the mechanics of this, the permission from SpaceX or other firms is not necessary, as the tokens represent securities sold by Republic itself. This is not a public offering by SpaceX themselves. Investors will be able to trade the tokens on INX, and Exchange Republic is in the process of acquiring, but there is a 1-year holding period. Just looking forward, Legendary, Republic is known for offering retail investors access to investments typically otherwise off limits. Allegedly, according to the Wall Street report, we could see future token launches, including notes on shares of OpenAI and Anthropic, if those two do not go public anytime soon. So very interesting here. I think it's very interesting because we've been speaking a lot about how maybe a lot of the hot market activity might move either to IPOs, towards Bitcoin treasury companies. This smells like something to me that people would get kind of excited about. But what do you think?
I like it. I like it a lot. We talked about something similar when it came to robotics and how difficult it is to invest in those markets when there's barely any publicly traded company to get exposure to what I think is going to be one of the most interesting sectors in the future. Very similarly, space exploration. This is SpaceX. If you think about it, it's the biggest private company in the world, period, valued at around $350 billion. And it's not easy to get exposure to that. In terms of the payment rails that Republic announced, there's two ways how you can acquire those shares, those tokens. You can either use USDC, obviously, or you can use Apple Pay, which is quite nice that they allow for both. And I can see that to be a very, very interesting venue to get more exposure to private companies and just see where the demand is there. I mean, SpaceX, again, as the most valuable private company, is probably an easy pick to see how this market will work out. There's a couple of things to keep in mind, as you said, from a legal perspective. You can't sell those tokens immediately. If an IPO occurs or other direct listing acquisition occurs, you'll get a payout that is equivalent to the increase in the SpaceX share value from your purchase and any connected dividends to that. There's a couple of things to keep in mind with that, but I really, really like it, and I really want to partake in that. Pete, you're muted.
Just a couple more details on the company itself. It has, I'm showing on the screen for people watching in, this is the Republic kind of context on the company. Nearly $13 billion in government contracts to date. Remember, this has got Starlink wrapped inside of it, right? And a lot of the profitability of SpaceX comes from Starlink. Starlink is the cash generating core of SpaceX, with projections showing the generation of $12.3 billion from 7.6 million subscribers in 2025. It has positive cash flow of 600 mil. A lot of the money comes in via Starlink, which is really, really impressive. Just a final point before you maybe walk us through the final headline, Ledge, because we're going to have Ross and Felix on with us in a second. The minimum amount to reserve is $50 if you want to participate here, and the maximum amount is 5,000. So it's not a huge.
I didn't see the maximum. That's
Yeah,
disappointing.
yeah. So it's not a huge amount of exposure that you can get, but if you want to, those are the parameters, and you need to enter into the website and say the number that you want and join the waitlist. So that would be the process if you wanted to get involved. I need to read a little bit more to confirm whether I want to do this or not. I wouldn't come to a conclusion just yet, but I'm certainly interested, and I think it's pretty cool. And it's definitely in line with our thought that some of this degenerate activity is going to move into some of the more traditional realms where the hot money goes in those directions. So it kind of fits the profile of where I think some of the market will move in the
That's
future.
actually internet capital markets for me. That makes way more sense than the other things we talked through. Like, remember when it came to robotics about, what is it? About like Sam, the small autonomous motherfucker, which is this robot that is autonomously exploring the world and has its AI agent on virtuals. And the robot is by a company called, I think it's Frodo Robotics or so, which is like, I would love to invest in that company. And I talked to you and I talked you through my thesis for that. And then we saw like, oh, but the only thing you can actually get exposure to is this AI agent on virtuals, which is using one of the robots, which is kind of connected to the company, but still like 3-4 layers removed. And that makes so much more sense. And that would be really cool if we see some of the more like futuristic private companies flowing into that.
Yeah, super interesting. Right. Well, so this is definitely on our radar. We're going to keep an eye on that. Ledge, final headline before we get Ross from Felix on with us. This is an interesting one too, though. Prediction markets heating up, I think. What do we need to know here?
Yep. Prediction market Kalshi is at a $2 billion valuation with 185 million raise. Obviously, the company also achieved unicorn status as a result of that. It was the Series C. Just a couple more details on that. Round was led by Paradigm. Some other, or quite some other digitally Web3 native VCs, digital asset firms also participated. And we have Sequoia, Multicoin, Neo and Bond Capital also being part of that Series C round. The last round that they did put them at a valuation of 787 mil. That was back in late 2024, where they had raised roughly $50 million in a private equity round. That is according to data from PitchBook, which Decrypt had reported on. And it is pretty fascinating to see this competition of sort between Kalshi, who now have completed this $185 million round, and Polymarket, where we also had reported earlier on the show this week that Polymarket is seeking to raise 200 mil and probably do that in a very, very similar range when it comes to the valuation of that. I've been thinking more about the prediction market side of things, just from the perspective of our show. Like, we've been reporting on prediction markets basically daily now since we're doing this macro updates, since we're focusing on what's going on with interest rates, what's going on with crypto price predictions, what's going on with the Middle East specifically, and also the election last year, and then seeing just how fast prediction markets are. If you think back to the US strike on the nuclear facilities in Iran, I think Polymarket had the news like 1-2 minutes before it was like actually starting to show up on X and other social media platforms. So we already have established by now that social media is faster than traditional media companies, but with that like uncertainty of that news which is being reported, is that true? Is that false? Is it citizen journalism? Is it just someone trolling? And now you obviously have that like security, quote unquote security layer added by that like financial involvement of having predictions on, or having money on a betting market, on a prediction market like Kalshi or Polymarket. And just because we're using it, so going back to what I said initially, so naturally on the show, and I'm betting like semi-frequently, I would say, on Polymarket, but I'm wondering if we shouldn't have more exposure to that, not as investors, obviously, because we're not going to get into the poly market round and definitely don't want to invest at the valuation, but more so as more active participants. I know it's a bit late for that, but you can still probably do significant volume. We reported on that trader who's following the nothing ever happens strategy, where we posted this video on. Basically made $250,000 betting that nothing happens. Putin, Zelensky, and Trump won't be in a room before the end of summer, etc., etc., etc. There's so many other things to play that. Obviously, you can be fast, track Trump's posts on Truth Social and see how that translates to poly market bets. You can try to hedge between two different prediction markets, just get volume on both going and have a bit more of a delta neutral strategy going. So there's many ways to play this, but I just realized, to sum my take up, that given the amount of time we spend talking about prediction markets on this show, I'm probably underexposed as a user to them when it just comes to raw volume that I'm putting through poly market.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. You speaking about the accuracy, I think it's correctly predicted before mainstream media as well. The New York Democrat mayor election, I think the media were kind of pretty slow on kind of concluding the winner, although they may have had an instinct as to what direction it was going. But whereas poly market was, but both of the prediction markets were faster in those respects. So I agree. We need to probably, as users, get on top of that a little bit more, and it'll be interesting to see the continued integration of prediction stuff and media. I think that's something which is going to continue to happen. And frankly,
we had the market and X deal that we reported on 1 or 2 weeks ago, right?
Exactly. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that with these integrations between prediction companies and media companies who will both want to interact with each other. Media companies will need truth from prediction markets, and prediction markets will want distribution from media, and that's something we're keeping a very, very close eye on. Would recommend everyone to do the same. But look, those are the main headlines for today. As we said at the top of the show and before the show, we're delighted today to have Ross from Felix Protocol with us. We've been speaking a lot about Felix. We've been speaking a lot about Hyperliquid. We're Hyperliquid obsessed. And Felix is one of the premier money markets on Hyperliquid, which we have been using and are super interested in ourselves. So delighted to have this conversation. Ross, thanks so much for joining us, man. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me on. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we are.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, my audio was being weird when I was trying to test it out. So glad you can hear me. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you with us, man. So just to following on from the conversation we were just having, before we get into the Felix stuff, what's your observation been on kind of prediction markets and the general market as we kind of moved into the summer? This stuff seems super hot right now. The valuations people are receiving are super high. Have you been observing that in any way?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, global events are going to be happening all the time, and with Felix specifically, we take this unique stance where we go back to March, go back to April, when the market was just kind of going down a little bit, and we just found that the best thing for users to do is just approach their entire portfolio in the most risk-adjusted way, because ultimately no one can predict the market. Otherwise, we'd all be millionaires. We might think Trump's going to do something one day, and then he does a completely different thing the next. And ultimately, what we try to push our users towards is the stability pools, at least, because an interesting thing that they can do there is obviously they're just sitting on stables, so they're not taking any directional risk, and then also they can earn liquidated collateral. So essentially they're shorting the market in a time of uncertainty, where if a user's getting liquidated, then they're going to be absorbing their collateral. So just to answer your question, it's tough to say, and I try not to take too heavy of a stance outside of once we know the market is in a fragile, uncertain state. It's just a good time to probably stable up and get your portfolio spread out a little bit, and we like to offer some of those vehicles directly on Felix as well.
Yeah, I like it. Someone was asking me just the other day, like, what's the best place to put some stables away on Hyperliquid, and I think Felix is probably top of my list. Some other good options as well, things like Hyperdrive and a couple of others too, but it's definitely one of my go-tos. Before we get into the product stuff, because we do want to dive into that, you mentioned the stability pool and things like that. It's definitely something that requires a little bit of explanation, but just to set the scene for people and people get to know you a little bit more, we had a quick chat before, I think it was just last week. You had a bit of an interesting history. So what's your history with crypto? Do you want to share, like, how did you get into the space?
Yeah, it's actually a really, really good question. I have a particularly unique situation. So I actually don't have a very robust background when it comes to crypto. I've been doing Army-related stuff for the last 9 years, and just came into crypto really within the last year, and knew some of the folks who are on the team here. And they wanted to bring me on just because my background's a little bit more unconventional, and that's their approach to how they handle most of the problem solving on the team. And we have a lot of methods that we use, especially on the BD side, that are particularly unconventional. And yeah, I think they just were attracted to my perspectives, my unique perspectives on organizational leadership, and a lot of other things that I learned during my time in the Army. So yeah, super unconventional, but learned a lot of different skill sets while I was in the Army. I mean, I was doing logistics, infantry, and then also just near the end, we were transitioning into basically just teaching soldiers how to fly SUAS, like you're seeing over in Ukraine and Russia, which I had zero background in whatsoever. And I had to learn all of that. The Army didn't have any doctrine for it. They just said, figure it out and go ahead and teach all these guys how to fly these things. So been just trying to become a fast learner for a long time now. So they saw my record there and like the unconventional perspective that I bring onto the team. So yeah, actually not an incredibly robust background, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
What principles from that skill set are you translating to your work now? And you mentioned also that the BD approaches are unconventional. What do you mean by that? Like, what are some of the things that you translate from your Army time to working with Felix, use Felix now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so to get at the first part of your question, you're asking, sorry, can you say, I got the second part. What was the first part again?
What skill sets from like being in the Army that you basically were able to take over and translate into your current work?
Absolutely. So I would say probably the biggest thing is flexibility, adaptability, and then also just constantly trying to be planning around an evolving situation, because your competitors are always going to be doing something similar to how the enemy is always going to be doing something, and the entire domain is going to be evolving as well. And so you might have this huge roadmap and this awesome, beautiful plan on how you're going to execute things, but ultimately you need to be able to switch things up super quickly. And I would say that's probably one of the biggest things is constantly having different irons in the fire. You're planning for success, but also you're having an open mind on how you're going to change your approach to things. And in terms of our unconventional approach, I mean, so I was an infantry officer, and I think where I learned a lot was and listen, I'm not saying like I'm a great leader or anything. It's just my philosophy on leadership is when you're taking care of your subordinates, you need to know everything about them. You need to know their needs. You need to know their goals on a super personal, intentional level. And what's unorthodox, that we're doing at Felix is we're going directly to pretty much all of our users. It's a lot of work. And I mean, that's the cost there is you just have to work an incredible amount of hours every day. but that was our perspective.
Just tell people, Ross, because you were telling me in the call that we had the other day, like when you say going to the end users, I know maybe some people talk about that kind of thing, but you mean like one-on-one chats in Telegram, one-on-one calls. Like, do you want to just share some of the scale there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I'd say we have somewhere around 1,000 different one-on-one chats where we're just trying to be super, super intentional and understand all of our users' goals, understand their needs. Because ultimately, our vision here is like we just want to create sustainable use cases so that people can ultimately achieve their financial goals and make money. So, you know, we have a pretty spread or robust effort to make sure that all of our users are getting that intentional, you know, personalized, like bespoke, you know, I guess like us catering to them. So yeah.
I love it. I think it's super, super important as a startup. It's kind of our philosophy as well to be super lean. And also I think there's some phrase where it's like, there's very few times where you can do things that don't scale. Like realistically, if you were to scale 10 times over, like you can't pursue that strategy forever. But at the beginning, when you're starting out, like you can do it. As you said, it's hard, but there is a space in time for a startup to do the things that don't scale. You don't need to worry like, oh, this is not scalable. The point is it helps here right now, and therefore it's worth pursuing right here, right now. So I completely agree with that perspective. Speaking of the users though, who you just mentioned, and as we kind of move into the product conversation, who would you say, because you know we've got a lot of listeners who are power users, a lot of entrepreneurs in crypto who are listening to the show as well. Who did you find are the users of Felix? What kinds of people find your product useful?
Absolutely. So I'd say to start, when Hyperliquid was, you know, originally just known as being a perp dex, before, you know, hey, we're going towards the house of all finance. That's why we started out with the CDP, because ultimately we just wanted to help these power traders get optimal capital efficiency and just get that additional liquidity to go trade on the order book. And then ultimately, you know, the user base has evolved a decent bit, and you know, there's plenty of folks who are just looking to farm yield on stables, maybe just create some leverage to go execute a carry trade, whether that's into HLP or our stability pools or some of the newer products that are coming out. And I would say essentially a lot of power traders, because ultimately, like, that's the product of Hyperliquid. It's this super you know, optimized order book. You know, these guys just want to trade, and so I would say that's a huge portion. But ultimately, yeah, you see a lot of the yield farmers, and then people just doing unique strategies like carry trades and whatnot.
Maybe building on that, can you explain and guide us through all of the different products that you have on Felix? There's the CDP lending, vanilla lending, you have USDHL. What are all those things?
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to answer this question because I can kind of hint at something we're working on as well. So obviously started out as the CDP, and just the unique aspect there is that users can set their own interest rate when they're borrowing. It's just at the cost of redemption risk. Happy to dive in there if you like. Then we found that users didn't want to be managing their interest rate and managing this so-called redemption risk. It was just an unfamiliar concept to a lot of folks. So we opened up Felix Vanilla, which is, you know, just traditional borrow lend, and users are just kind of at the mercy of the market rate there. But it's a much more, you know, hands-off experience. Just recently launched USDHL, and, you know, the down, you know, quick and dirty story there is it's really just getting at Circle and Tether are collecting treasury yield, and it's going straight to their balance sheets. And we're taking that same treasury yield, buying Hype back with it, and then we're distributing it out to the users. And so we've seen some good adoption so far, hoping to grow it some more. And Yeah, there you go. That's M0. We're powered by M0. And, ultimately, I think the next big unlock for USDHL could be on a exchange through HIP3. So we're looking at participating in HIP3, working on some exchange products, and considering USDHL denominated perps for that. Just kind of assessing what power traders want. Is this something they want? Do they just want USDC? So I'm going through that right now, but ultimately, I think that's the next big unlock, and that's the next product we're working on that I'm kind of throwing out here for you guys that we haven't even really talked about super publicly yet. There's plenty of users that know that we're working on it, but figured I'd share that out here today.
That's awesome. I don't know how much more you're able to share, but just to double click on it to give people the understanding and appreciation of what you just explained. HIP3, USD DHL denominated perps, like just put that in a package for us so people can understand like what that means, what that could look like. I appreciate maybe some of the stuff you can't share all of it, but what's the key takeaway there?
Yeah, I think.
Or what's the opportunity you're looking to seize? Yeah,
absolutely. So I can't specifically say like what it is yet, but I mean, ultimately, I think the best thing that HIP3 is going to allow builders to do is, put in portfolio margin, different stables like USDHL, bring in equity perps, bring in, indices on there as well. And I think there's a lot of demand for those kinds of things out there. And so, I'd say just switching up, what the underlying collateral is, and then just giving people access to more, TradFi, some more TradFi assets.
Love it. Super interesting. Maybe just taking one step back before we take one step forward. You mentioned Felix USD, which is the dollar, which you kind of have to manage a little bit better. I think people would be super curious to understand, as would I be, like, what is the best way to manage it? You mentioned this variable interest rate that you can kind of set yourself if you want to borrow against your assets and mint feUSD. How should, as you said, and I think a lot of people found that unfamiliar, there's this redemption risk. What's the best way to manage it? How should people think about it to manage their risk?
Yeah, absolutely. So the issue with redemption risk is if you have the lowest interest rate on the protocol, then you are first in line to be redeemed against. It's not liquid. You're not being liquidated. You're being redeemed against. And ultimately that just means that your debt is paid off for $1, and then somebody exchanges, in feUSD for $1 of your collateral. So in an immediate sense, it's a financially neutral event that occurs. However, you're now exposed to impermanent loss because now you're exposed to $1 less of whatever collateral you were using. All of this happens when the peg of feUSD drops down specifically below 99.5 cents. It begins to become profitable for redeemers. So I would say, to answer your question, it's good to monitor the peg. We've seen really strong, a strong trend of being above peg or just around 1 over the last 3 to 4 weeks. We just had some solutions on our end when it comes to the stability pool APY. So we've seen a substantial increase in organic demand for feUSD. And the problem in the past was that organic demand really wasn't there. It was mostly just demand from the redemption mechanism. So we saw users getting redeemed against. They weren't able to have a particularly cheap interest rate. But now we've seen a far more, attractive distribution of interest rates, as opposed to people just kind of trying to get into the back of the line. Now it looks much more like a normal distribution. So I would say, number one, monitor the peg. Number two, monitor your position, daily. And then number three, where we're trying to help the user out, is we're developing a Telegram notification bot that will let you know if you were redeemed. So ultimately, if you're doing those first two things, and then you're also, you're signed up for this notification bot, then you can avoid impermanent loss almost entirely, and then just set your interest rate as low as you'd like, and just borrow cheaper. So ultimately, that's what we want. We want people to be able to borrow as cheaply as possible to achieve their financial goals.
Gotcha. That is super, super helpful. Maybe zooming out a bit from that and going more into the ecosystem layer, so to speak. What is it that you find so unique about Hyperliquid as the environment that you chose to build Felix on?
Yeah, I would say two things here. So number one, I think it's just the product market fit, and the focus on the product at in the Hyperliquid eco. It's tremendous, and ultimately that's what's going to be most sustainable in the long run. You have people who don't even really know about Felix. A lot of people that don't know anything about anyone on Hyper EVM, that they're all using the order book right now. And we've had several users who had no exposure to Hyper EVM that were just there to trade, and now they're parking some stables with us to hedge against some of their trades. And yeah, so I would say ultimately you're just going to continue to see this influx of users to the order book, which is super attractive. And then as a secondary indirect effect, I think you'll see a lot of spillover into the Hyper EVM. And then I would say also,
so can I jump in quickly here? Because you say there's a secondary effect that will see the spillover into the Hyper EVM. Do you think that this is something that will just happen organically with like Hyperliquid growing further and further and further? Or is it just a result of the cumulative efforts of builders on Hyper EVM who will speak to those people, who will be those distribution channels? Is the mix of all of the above? How do you see this like flowing into EVM happening?
Yeah, that's such a good question. We talk about that one frequently, and I would say it's probably a mix of both. Probably a little bit, right now in this particular state, as Hyperliquid still, it has established itself, but as it's still, growing, I would say a lot of it is just going to kind of depend on, basically just awareness, and I would say hype price going up as well. Ultimately, like, people use Ethereum, because ETH has accumulated a ton of value, and same thing with Sol. So I would say, yeah, a lot of builders are probably going to have to do that, BD effort themselves. But there's just going to need to be this like natural transition and organic growth that just kind of naturally happens with Hyperliquid as well. So yeah, I'd say a mix of both.
I like it. I'm curious to ask, I think a lot of people looking at the whole ecosystem as things stand, trying to assess like relative value, right? Ultimately, it's still quite early on Hyperliquid. There's all kinds of teams building out there. Not a lot of teams have tokens out there and can determine value. I'm curious from your guys' perspective, because you're not just, the interesting thing is with you guys, you're not just a pure borrow lend protocol, right? You're doing other things. There's this stablecoin initiative. There's this HIP3 initiative getting kind of cooked in the background. What are your key metrics for success, and how should people think about valuing you in that respect?
Yeah. I would say it's a good question. Ultimately, I would say one of the biggest one is, are we developing sustainable products to help users achieve their financial goals? And I think that's just measured through TVL growth over time. What you hate to see is, oh, look at all this great growth that's happened, and then fast forward 9 months and it's just, dipped down tremendously, because everyone's just moving on to like another shiny object. So I would say that's probably our primary way of measuring like, are we like actually executing on our vision? And like I said, that being sustainable products that users like, hey, I'm earning yield here that I find attractive. I trust this protocol. I trust the team. I want to keep my money here. I feel like it's safe. And ultimately, I think it's just, where's our TVL at over time? Is it sticky? And although it's difficult to scale these very personal relationships, we're trying to bring more folks on the team and ensure that we can keep doing that, because I think ultimately, if you have your money and you're depositing it somewhere, you want to feel like but you want to actually know who the team is, and feel like you can trust the team. So I'd say TVL growth, and then from a USDHL perspective, and just kind of winning there, I would say probably the biggest indicator that we're succeeding there is just getting it to be a more like widely accepted stable across Hyper EVM, and then ultimately accepted as collateral on the order book. I think there's a lot of traders that are looking for that. So I think just as an indicator, that would be it. But yeah, metric wise, just TVL growth.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's super helpful to try to evaluate stuff. We're just moving into the last couple of questions. I'm conscious of time. We've kind of pushing towards half an hour already. Speaking of the valuations, what's your raise situation? I know a lot of teams on Hyperliquid in general are raising or looking to raise or finalizing that kind of process, and lots of people are looking to participate early in some of the protocols they like best. How have you thought about raising and valuations and things of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did a pre-seed back in the fall, and then right now we are just wrapping up our seed round with Variant and Reciprocal, and just a handful of angels as well. So yeah, to your point, if we're growing, we'll probably be raising again. And so if we are, would love to, bring on more angels if we can. We just brought on a few new ones for this additional round that are some more of our committed users that just want to see us do well. So yeah, we're closing our seed round right now with Variant, Reciprocal, and a few angel investors as well.
Good stuff. Congrats on that. And then maybe finally, before we kind of close off here, what are we looking forward to? I know you're on the move. You're kind of doing a bit of a tour on some of the conferences. And on the product side, is there anything that you really want to give us a window into here before we kind of close out?
Yeah. No, this exchange product that we're working on.
Can tell that's the one that's got you excited.
Yeah, it's actually it's taken up a lot of my time right now. But ultimately, I think
why are you so excited about that? Do you think?
I just
why
think
is the team so excited?
Yeah, I think what's really cool is Hyperliquid is, and I was going to get at this earlier, but they give builders so many opportunities. They've given us the opportunity to deploy a stable. Now they're giving us an opportunity to build an exchange product. And ultimately, the Hyperliquid team is just so focused on giving users the chance to innovate. And although, things can be quite competitive, I think ultimately that mindset of the Hyperliquid team is so good for the users, because the users are now getting products, from teams that are competing heavily to innovate, give them, the best possible thing. So yeah, I think that's the reason I'm so excited about it, is just because it's just another opportunity that Hyperliquid has given us, to deliver a sustainable use case to a user. And specific. I mean, what I can say is, we would love to, push on USDHL denominated perps, especially with, TradFi assets. So we're excited to see that, potentially become a reality as well. So just a lot of conversations with traders out there, and just trying to see what their needs are. And but yeah, that's our we should be, you know, having an announcement around it, you know, in the coming weeks. But you know, I talked with the team. I was like, can I share just a little bit about it on the show today? So yeah.
Well, we got our alpha drop, so we're happy on our side. Do we need to check with the team if we can clip that and put it out, or is this just for the space in the show on the live show?
Yeah, I think it's. Let me check. I think it should be
clippable?
fine. But I'll double check.
All right, we'll wait for confirmation then. But just as we close out here, Ross, anything else you'd like to share? I'm just going to share as you're kind of wrapping up here. But if you want to follow along, Ross, for what he is up to, he's at 0xREAZ on Twitter, and of course, Felix Protocol is at Felix Protocol on Twitter too. Anything else we've missed, Ross? Anything else we want to keep on top of mind?
I just say, you know, for anyone who sees this or is listening out there, we will respond to any message, whether you message me or some of our team. And if we don't, it's probably because it, you know, got buried somewhere, because we do have a lot of messages. But ultimately, we want to talk with users, and we build our products through user design. We're not just building with some engineers in a silo. We're building based off of what the users want. So ultimately, I just want people to know that, you know, if they want to get to know the team better, you know, on a more personal level, just reach out to us, whether it's our, you know, our personal accounts or the Felix account, and we'll have a conversation with you. I just think a lot of those conversations get lost in the Discord, and it just the Discord cannot allow users to get to know the team to the level of detail that they typically would like.
Well, I can vouch for that, because I went back in the DM history, and it was actually you guys reaching out to me first.
Yeah.
Like I can't even remember when, because we've just been kind of going back and forth for a while now before I even knew who was behind the account, but that was from the main account. So yeah, that's really awesome to see that kind of, you know, one-on-one approach. So anyway, Ross, thanks so much for joining us, man. That's been really, really helpful. We got the alpha drop. We will hopefully clip that and put it out there for the users. But just a reminder for everyone listening in, we do this every single day, Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern time for 1 hour live on X video, YouTube, and you can catch us on Apple and Spotify too. Thanks so much for joining us again, Ross. It's been a pleasure.
Of course.
And everyone else, we'll see you again tomorrow. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
And bye-bye.